Hey guys, so as you can read in the title, this video is going to be all about jugging a line. So I have two different ways I'm going to talk to you about how to jug a line. One is one ascender, and then the other is the two ascender method. The one ascender method has plenty of advantages over the two ascender, but mainly it's because it involves less gear. If you don't have that far to jug, maybe you're just a route setter at a gym, or you're just looking up a route to feel out the movements or do whatever, then one ascender method is great. But however, the two ascender method is extremely more efficient than the one ascender, because if you time it right, you can have it going like a ladder or just blasting up the rope. So that's the kind of method that you want to use if you're on a bigger climb where the leader is leading, fixing the rope, and then the follower cleans the pitch while jugging the line. And you get those. That's definitely the most common way to big wall climb out there. And so that's why I'm going to show you both methods. First thing I'm going to talk about is the different materials you use for jugging. And pretty much these are the same materials that you use while aid climbing. The first thing I'm going to talk about are daisy chains. And so you have the much more traditional pocketed daisy right here, where you find the longer end and would put that into your harness. And then you have the adjustment of the different pockets, which actually, if you are doing a lot more jugging than leading, this isn't bad to have, because you can just keep your ascender clipped into the same pocket every time. You put a little piece of tape there or whatever to mark it, and then you know the exact length. Whereas I usually don't tend to use these things. I usually tend to use the Metolius Easy Daisies, which a lot of my friends and a lot of aid climbers like using because of the higher amount of just adjustability. And you can literally fine tune it into inches. And so this is what I tend to use while aid climbing, so it's definitely what I tend to use while jugging a line. You usually want two of these, one for each Jumar, if you are using the two Jumar method. A lot of times if you are only using one Jumar, you only need one. But a lot of times people will also do one of these for the two Jumar method. It's kind of your choice after you've gained enough experience. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about are foot loops. And so here I have this, this is the Alpine aider. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called. And it's just another form of atriere that gets tangled up just as much as the others. This is a 5 step, but you can have, you pretty much use whichever one you've been aid climbing with. So if you have a 5-step nylon one, a 6-stepper, or the 8-step ladder, that's your choice. You just use whichever one you like for aid climbing. Another thing I have here, me and a friend were recently playing around with this thing. This is also made by Metolius. I don't know what it's called. We'll call it the Easy Foot Loop. But it's pretty much just what it is. It's just a foot loop. It's completely adjustable by the same Easy Daisy system right here. I do wish that they made this strap a little bit smaller, because, I mean, like, who is going to need something this big? Who has a leg span taller than my body? That's just like, they should have put less material on it. But anyway, you can just adjust this to the right stepping length and then stand up on it. This would be really nice to pair up with the daisy chain if you're doing more jugging than climbing on your route, because you can just keep it the same length and not have to bother with adjusting things every time you go to jug a line. So now let's talk about Jumars. These are your standard Jumars. These are made by Petzl. A bunch of other companies will make these though. Essentially what these are they're just movable handles going up the rope. And so what we have here is right and left Jumar, this one being the right, this one being the left. You know which one is which because if you hold them in front of you, this thing should be facing you, this cam system right here. And so that's how I know this is my right Jumar and this is my left. You'll notice how these have this little thumb catch system, and that is for the opening up of the tooth cam right here. So the tooth cam, it's called the tooth cam because it has a bunch of teeth that face down. So that way when you're rubbing the ropes running along it, the teeth bite and the Jumar can't go down, but it slides up very easily. And you'll see that when I ascend. There's a couple different ways to open up the cam. One is what I like to call half open, where you take this thing and then just push the cam down a little bit, which you actually do an awful lot if you want to down ascend the rope, or if you have to let the rope slide through the Jumar easier because there's not enough weight of the rope to hold it down. And then there's the full open, where you actually push this lever down and then hook it around the side. And now this thing is fully open, like what you would do when you're cleaning a piece, or when you initially put these things on the rope. I like to carry these both on one single non-locker because that just helps keep them together, and then I actually use this non-locker while jugging the rope, which you'll see in a little bit. In addition to all the other stuff I talked about, you're also going to want either a gree-gree or a micro traction. These are for the sake of backing up your jugging. Depending on which system you're using, the 1 Jumar or the 2 Jumar, one of the gree-gree is definitely more favorable over the micro traction, but I will show you how to load up both of them. Okay, so first thing I got to do is set up my Easy Daisies on my harness. I'm using my big wall harness for this, so I have 2 separate belay loops. So what I'm going to do is just hook one into each belay loop. This again is personal preference in a lot of cases as to what if you want to do belay loop or your master point, it doesn't matter what. Okay, so that's the first step right there. Both Easy Daisies are set up. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is put my Jumars on the rope. And so depending on if you're right-handed or left-handed, that whatever your dominant hand is, it's going to go on top. So since I'm right-handed, I'm going to clip the right one on top of the left one. There we go. So at this point, I can pull out my daisies. Again, with my particular harness, you can see how I have the 2 separate loops. So I'm going to clip the right daisy into the top right one just to make life a bit easier. And now I can adjust. So I'm going to start with something a bit smaller. I want my arm to stay a little bit more bent. And now I can pull my Easy Daisy. Right now this isn't like a full-on adjustment because I need to take all the stretch out of the rope. But this is where I'm starting. Anytime I stand up and I push the Jumar up, I want my arm to be a little bit bent. Now I'll take my other daisy chain, clip it to the lower left loop. This one is more of a fail-safe, and so it stays loose. You never really sit on this daisy. With the extra non-locker I use to hold my Jumars, I'm going to clip that into the top of my bottom Jumar. And what that does is it is possible for this Jumar to come off, or like to come disengaged from the rope if I hold it just right. And a lot of people have actually ripped their Jumars off the rope and the whole thing has fallen down. And so by having that carabiner and what I'm going to call the oh shit hole, that prevents that problem. Usually I don't do that on the top one because if I'm cleaning a pitch, I'll have a piece of gear up here and I just have to take this off and put it above anyway. But if I'm jugging a line, like a long line at the start of the day just to get up to our high point, then I will just take one of my lockers I carry with me and stick it on the top. All right, next thing I'm going to do is clip the ladder in. And so the ladder, sometimes you can have one on each of the Jumars, but a lot of times that is unnecessary. And so I usually only have a ladder on the bottom Jumar. And that's because this is the one I stand up in while I push the upper one up. Last thing before I set off from the ground is I want to put in some sort of fail-safe in case this whole thing falls apart on me. And so you can do that with a couple of devices. A lot of times I use my gree-gree, especially if me and my friend are swinging leads, so I just use this to belay my friend up. Sometimes, if I am not planning on cleaning anything and I'm just jugging a fixed line, I'll use a micro traction and hook that into the rope because there's a lot less resistance and the rope just slides through the micro traction. So I'll demonstrate that. Put this on one of the belay loops. Takes some work to, or it takes some practice to work with one of these things, but I always like to remember that the big loop is on top. So I'm going to stick the rope in there, close it down, engage the teeth. Big loop on top, and then I can always test by pulling up and locking my carabiner. Pulling up, and then you can see how I'm sitting on the micro traction. And so as I go up, the rope will just slide smoothly through this device. If I'm using a gree-gree, I just load it the same way as you always would load it for belaying your climber up. And then you just have to know that every 20 feet or so you jug up, you have to pull rope through the gree-gree. Once you get enough rope below you, then the rope will start sliding through, but it takes a lot longer than the micro traction. Okay, so now I'm ready to actually start going up the rope. I'm using a dynamic rope here. This rope is actually a 10-2 millimeter rope, so it's pretty thick in terms of modern day ropes. This is what I like to jug up on. Anyone who has had jugging experience, if you ever jugged a static rope, you know how easy that is because there's pretty much no stretch and you have all the vertical gain. whereas on dynamic ropes, it's a little bit bouncy. So usually the hardest part about jugging a dynamic rope is getting off of your station or the ground. What I like to do is keep on sliding this up as much as I can until I can actually sit my weight down on the rope. Luckily, I don't have that much rope going up the wall, so there's not as much stretch. The bigger the pitch is, the more the rope is going to stretch, and the more stretch you have to take out of the system before you can sit on the rope. At this point, I am sitting on the rope. I'm going to put my foot in my easy, or in my étrier. I know for me that the third step down is where I want to be for my foot, because that gives me the most amount of push up, but that's something you have to experiment with yourself. And so now I can do my final adjustments. It looks like I kind of want to be a bit closer to my upper Jumar, just a small amount. There you go. It was like literally a 2-inch difference, but I have that little bend in my arm. That's another personal thing that just takes time and practice. All right, so now I'm ready to go. I'm going to stand up on my left foot, and I'm going to push the Jumar up. There we go. Perfect form, I may add. And so you can see how being on a more vertical wall like this, I'm only using one étrier, and then my right foot is pressed against the wall just to keep my balance. And so you can do this with the 2-ladder method, but I just don't think that it would be appropriate in this setup. And so now I'm going to keep on sliding my left foot up. I can stand up on it. When I rock in, I want to put all my weight on my foot and keep my balance on this Jumar, which allows me enough time to push this thing up, and then I can sit back down on my Jumar. Set that up again. Now you can see I have a little bit of a loop of rope right here, whereas if I was using micro traction, it would keep up with me, but I just have to pull rope through my green. Another thing I like to do is after 20, 30, 40 jugs, my left leg starts to get really tired, and so I personally will switch to my right foot. And even though it's on the left and it's kind of like diagonal, that really doesn't bother me that much, and I can rest my one leg while using my other one. So if you ever want to go down your rope like a long ways, then you can always transfer yourself to your backup. If it's a micro traction, then you're going to have to switch it out for something like a gree-gree or an ATC. In this case, I have a gree-gree. So what I'm going to do is stand up, and instead of pushing my upper Jumar up, I'm going to pull the rope through my gree-gree. There we go. So now the gree-gree is engaged. I can take off all the swag. And then rappel down like you normally would with a gree-gree. Let's talk about the one Jumar method. In this case, I'm only using the Jumar as my foothold going up the rope, and my progress capture will be my gree-gree. This is a method where you wouldn't want to use your micro traction in it. And so what I have here is my Jumar is set up. I have my Easy Daisy right here. I have my étrier on the same carabiner. I'm going to clip the Jumar onto the rope, and I'm going to clip my little oh shit hole. And notice how I'm using a left-handed Jumar, because I want my right hand to pull the rope up through the gree-gree. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my left foot into the third ladder on the Jumar, because again, that's just where I really like to put it. I'm going to stand up and then pull that rope through my gree-gree. You'll notice in comparison to the double Jumar method, I can't take full advantage of, or I'm just not as efficient. I can't take full advantage of standing up, and I can't pull up as much rope as with the double Jumar method, which means I'm going to be doing more standing up, and I'm going to just not be as efficient. So doing this in doing a lot of this over the course of a big wall is just more tiring, and overall will take more time. Pulling up on this rope will get pretty tiring. So one thing I can do is take another carabiner, clip it into the Jumar somewhere, and then I can clip the rope into that carabiner, which makes a 3-to-1 pulley on myself. And also it just helps that I'm pulling down with my bigger muscles. A little bit less tiring. Kind of gives you a bit more of a fluid motion too, if you ask me. Transferring to going down on this system is pretty simple. Just take the Jumar, well, take your foot out of the ladder, and then take the Jumar off the rope. And now you're on your gree already, so you just lower yourself on down.
Poor guy. Is he okay?
He's still moving.
Okay,
He's good.
let's just put him out here and let him get onto the ground.
There we go.
Here you go. Come on out of the pool. Put him flat. Yeah, let him climb out.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing, Mom.
Well.
There we go.
Oh,
Don't bother him too much.
I know. What if he's gonna belch up a bunch of water?
I don't know. He's actually moving pretty good. Maybe they can actually swim.